So, so welcome. Yes, if you've made it this far, congratulations. We've covered an awful lot this week, and I hope you found it useful. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this session is going to be relatively short and straightforward. We really only have three things to do, and actually one of those things is to talk about the deliver page. And if you actually look at your book, this is lesson 14. I think it's only about 6 or 7 pages long, so there's not an awful lot that we need to talk about in the book. But yes, session 5 is where we now find ourselves. So we are going to be looking at the deliver page. We will be also talking about media database and project management in general. Not a hugely sexy and necessarily exciting subject, but nevertheless, it's an important subject anyway. So we will be spending a little bit of time taking a look at that. We will have a short break after that, and then we will actually pick up pretty much where the book starts, and we'll finish off by talking about high-speed editing in the cut page. So we will be revisiting what is actually lesson 1 in the book. I know, strange, isn't it? We end on lesson 1, but hopefully it will make sense when we actually get there. The other thing to mention is that we'll also be sharing a bit of further information about the exam with you. So we'll let you know if you haven't already taken the exam, sort of what to expect in terms of, signing into the exam and information that you might want to put there. Diego and Sherwin are still there in the background. I'm sure Diego's still listening to his music, but he's also probably got one eye on the chat window. So
yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Good morning to everyone.
So again, if you've got any questions or if you want to share some personal issues or something like that, maybe don't do that at all. But if you've got any questions regarding the training or Resolve in general, again, please use the Q&A window. For comments about my new haircut, or perhaps what Diego was doing, listening to music instead of listening to Van Halen, then obviously use the chat window for that. That would be great. So let's get started. We will be taking a look at lesson 14 from the book. So this is about delivery. Now we have touched on delivery previously in terms of the quick export function. If you remember all the way back on Monday when we were doing our glass blowing exercise, you'll remember that we actually just output a file. It got slightly screwed up for a number of us, which I'm not entirely sure why that would be. But hopefully you get the idea of being able to create a quick export. So what we're going to do here is we're actually going to just take a look specifically at the deliver page and just sort of understand what the deliver page offers us. If you just need to output a file very quickly, then the quick export functions are quite useful. So we will do a quick review of that. We'll be looking at doing two things in the deliver page. The first is actually creating a web streaming file. So this is a file that's suitable for output to Vimeo or YouTube, but also looking at some of the customization options which you don't get in the quick export window. And we'll also be looking at being able to create a custom preset. So if any of those standard presets aren't suitable for what you need to produce, then we'll look at how you can create your own custom preset and save that to use another time. So as I say, this is a very short lesson. There's not an awful lot that we need to say at this stage about the deliver page, other than you can deliver to a number of options. So let's just get stuck in and let's see what the deliver page offers us. As always, I'm in the free version of Resolve, and I've got the project manager open to begin with. This contains all the projects we've been working on this week. They're almost like old friends by now, aren't they? So you're going to feel sorry about saying goodbye to them probably. But we're actually going to use the Age of Airplanes project for this. To be honest, we could use any project that's got a timeline and got an editing, but let's go for Age of Airplanes, because that's probably the most fully formed project that we've got. And you'll remember that we actually have a number of timelines for this, for the different exercises that we've got. So just make sure from the timeline viewer pop-up menu that you've got chapter 12 Fairlight. So make sure you've got the Fairlight timeline open. Again, doesn't matter if you've got something else open, but we can always, the process is exactly the same. And also you might just want to use the workspace reset UI layout option as well, just to be able to reset the interface so that, for almost the last time. We go, and I'll just go into full extent zoom. There we go. Okay, so very quickly, just to review what we talked about in terms of output previously. What we did with the glass blowing exercise is we had something edited together, and once we'd finished that, we just wanted to output a very quick file, just something that we could share online or maybe post to the internet or something. And so in that case, what we did was we used, from the file menu, we used the new quick export option. So quick export, and I say new, actually it's not that new, but we now have this. Now remember, you won't necessarily get all of the options that I've got. If you're on a Windows PC, for example, you won't get the ProRes option. I think as well there are also some limitations on the free version versus the studio version as well, in terms of formats that you can output, but nevertheless, again, I'm on the free version here. So we actually output an H.264 file, and H.264 is a variation of MPEG-4 video, and so this is useful for sort of uploading video to the internet, sharing things online. And you can see again, the resolution is based on the timeline resolution that I'm currently working in. So is things like frame rate. Video codec is actually set by the preset, but the frame rate and the resolution are set by the timeline. If you wanted to produce a file that you could upload something directly to Vimeo or to YouTube, then what you can do is you can select those presets, and ultimately they're pretty much the same, if I'm being honest with you, because the resolution, the codec, the frame rate all tends to be the same for these sorts of things. The difference with these social media accounts, though, is that you can actually sign in and publish directly to those. So again, you can only publish directly to YouTube, Vimeo, and Twitter at the moment. So if you needed to do something like Instagram or Facebook or something like that, then actually producing an H.264 file using one of these presets, then manually uploading it is probably just as easy. To sign into your account, you just click on the Manage Account option, and this will actually take you directly to your Internet account section on the system preferences. So you can always come via the system preferences and sign in here anyway. All you'd need to do is just sign in using your credentials from that particular account. So if you wanted to publish to Vimeo, for example, put your Vimeo username and password in, and then when you save your preferences, when this will then update, and it will actually allow you to put information in for uploading to the social media. So for Vimeo, for example, it'll allow you to name the video, it'll allow you to put, who's allowed to see the video, and also a description as well. So we'll see those fields elsewhere. I'm not going to actually sign in just at the moment for this. So that's pretty much that. The only thing that you've probably got a little bit of control over is if you want to actually output a small section of the timeline. So rather than actually output the whole timeline, you might actually want to just send a section. If, for example, you might have a film and you just want to send a scene just to the director to get some feedback or something on it. In that case, it's worth noting about the duration here. The duration is based on the duration of the whole timeline by default. However, if I just cancel that and I set an in and an out point, I'll turn off my audio scrubbing as well, and then come back to my quick export function here, you'll actually see the duration has changed. So it's gone from 50 seconds down to 13 seconds here. So again, that's just using the duration between the in and the out points on the edit page. So now the file that will be produced will only be that small section between the in and the out points. I'm going to remove those in and out points. So you could either go to the mark menu and choose clear in and out, or you could use Option or Alt X in order to be able to remove those in and out points. This is also quite useful. For example, you might need to output a section maybe for a visual effects artist or a graphic designer to, put together a graphic or something for you. So I've had to do that on occasion. So knowing that you can output something very, very quickly is a useful feature. However, beyond the quick export, we actually have a full deliver page, and that's really where we need to go for this. So I promised you that we would visit every single page within DaVinci Resolve. So true to my promise, this is the penultimate page. So down at the bottom, click on the deliver page in order to gain access to the full deliver functionality. So let me just lower my timeline track heights a little bit there so that we can see everything a bit clearer. Hopefully you are sort of, relatively comfortable with what you're currently seeing. Over on the left-hand side, over on the left-hand side of the interface, you actually have a set of render settings. I'll come back to that in a second because that's where the main choices are available for what we need to do with the deliver page. We've got a viewer, so we can actually, if we need to, we can scrub backwards and forwards, and we can, check various parts of the timeline, so forth. You've actually got a clips window here so that you can actually, sort of navigate up and down the timeline by the clips. I don't tend to have that turned on personally, but you can, it's not going to cause any huge harm there. I usually just hide the clips window using this clips option here. It just keeps the interface a little cleaner from my point of view. But also on the right hand side, and we are on the right hand side this time, we've actually got the render queue itself. And what we have here is we've got the timeline that we're going to output, which is going to be the timeline that you've got currently loaded from the edit page. And we just need to choose the render settings that we need to for the file type that we want to produce. And then what we do is we add those settings to the render queue. But that in itself doesn't actually start the render. In order to start the render, we actually have to enable and start the render queue. So it's a couple of step process that we can do. So first of all, you'll notice along the top of the timeline, there is an in and an out point set for the entire duration. So this is from the very first clip to the very last clip in the timeline. If, like a lot of editors I know, you like to store clips at the end of the timeline, of course that will then include those as part of the export, so just be careful you don't include them. I can tell you a funny story or two about including clips at the end of the timeline. there's a pop-up menu here about what you actually want to render. So whether you want to render the entire timeline by default, or whether you want to render a specific in and out range. And again, you can set in and out points here in the deliver page around a portion of the timeline that you want to export. So whether that's a single clip, whether it's a range of clips, a scene, or whatever you need. Excuse me. As well as that, over here on the left, you've got all of your presets along the top here. So you'll notice that we've got things like YouTube, Vimeo, Twitter, ProRes, because again, I'm on a Mac. If we scroll through this, here I've got H.264, but then I've got other options as well. And there are lots of sort of presets for this, depending on where you actually want to send your video to. And the thing about this is to remember that Resolve isn't just capable of being able to work independently on its own. So it isn't just a case that you have to edit in Resolve, you have to grade in Resolve. Resolve has very much been part of multi-application workflows for many, many years. So it might be that a show gets edited in, say, Final Cut or Premiere or Avid, and then gets sent here into Resolve for grading, or possibly even audio mixing, with Fairlight. And then what you want to do is you want to send that graded program or the finished mixed audio back into the editing system. So here you've got options for sending your clips, your rendered clips and your graded clips back into Final Cut Pro, back into Premiere, back into Avid. Notice you've also got options for Pro Tools. So this would enable you to send your audio that you might decide doesn't need to be mixed in Fairlight, but you want to send it to a Pro Tools mixing system. So you can do that here as well. Or you can just export your audio only. So, if you don't need the pictures at all, you just want to do an audio only program, you've got the option of doing that here as well. You'll notice that some of these presets actually have a little drop down arrow next to it, and this is because there'll often be multiple options. So for example, here in the Final Cut Pro option, if I click on this drop down menu, you'll see I've got two flavors of Final Cut Pro. I can go to Final Cut Pro 7, the old legacy software, or I can go to the new Final Cut Pro 10 software as well. Whereas something like Premiere or something like Avid or Pro Tools, they don't have that option. They're just using the latest formats that those applications accept. Also, there's an important point about these as well. Something like Final Cut Pro, Premiere and Avid, what you're tending to do is actually render out individual clips and send those clips back via usually something like an XML or an AAF in order for the edit to be rebuilt. So what you're tending to do is you're actually exporting individual clips of each clip in the timeline. Whereas, of course, for something like YouTube, Vimeo, or Twitter, or even a ProRes, you're actually just going to send out a single clip of everything together. And that's another important distinction that's worth making in the deliver page, is that it can create a single video file with all the video and the audio in and the graphics all mixed down together and flattened into a single file, but it can also send out all of the information on the timeline with the clips as individual clips, but then you would need to rebuild that in another system somewhere. More often than not, because I'm tending to just stay within Resolve anyway, I'm not necessarily needing to output those individual clips. I just need to output a single clip just for the sake of delivering the video. So whether that's a single clip I'm just going to upload to social media, or whether it's a single clip that ultimately is going to get broadcast, I just need to provide a single clip. So here in this case, we're going to choose the Vimeo option. I mean, there's no huge difference between any of these, I don't believe. So if I just select the Vimeo option, and you'll notice here, there's a little drop down again, and you can see here underneath it says 1080, so 1080p. So this is the resolution that we're ultimately going to be outputting. If you click in the little downward menu there, you can see that there are several options for Vimeo. So we've got HD at 720 and 1080, and we've also got UHD resolution here as well. Now these are just presets. These are just settings. So you can actually choose which one of those is most appropriate. Most appropriate for what you ultimately want to deliver, but also most appropriate for the type of footage that you're working with. We'll come to that in a second. So I'm just going to leave that set to 1080 there. Underneath here, you've actually got some settings that you can just review and just take a look at. Now, the first thing is the actual file name. What are you going to call this file when it ultimately gets output? And the second is the location. Where are you going to output that file to? Now you can just type into these file names, these fields, just for this, but I actually quite like to take a slightly more direct approach to this. And if you click the browse button, this will enable you to browse right across your system. And it's a nice, friendly system finder or Windows Explorer. So I'm going to head over to my desktop. I'm going to actually, I'll create a folder on my desktop. I usually just create a folder anyway, and we'll just call this delivery. And here at the top, the file name, I can actually change this. So here I can actually just highlight that, and I could call it Age of Airplanes. Actually, we'll call it Age of Airplanes for Vimeo. There we go, Age of Airplanes Vimeo. Again, you can call it whatever you want. Obviously, name it some way that you know what it is. Quite often, sometimes various delivery formats require you to name them in a specific way. But what we can do is we can just save that, and you can see that that information has now been updated in the file name and location. So rather than just sort of typing in the fields here, you can just hit the browse and actually access that in a familiar window. The settings here are resolution. So what are we ultimately outputting this as? And what frame rate are we ultimately outputting this as? Now, I'm going to come back to both of those features in a second. They're both of those fields in a second. So just hold on to the thought just for the moment. You've also got information about format, the video codec that you're using, the audio that you're actually going to be outputting as well, along with the audio codec. Now, just a quick thing on this. Generally, if we're using a preset like Vimeo, there's certain formats that they prefer to accept. They can often accept many different formats, but usually there might be an upload limit or something like that. So they would usually recommend a specific format. So here in this case, the video codec is H.264. I could choose, in this case, a different video codec. And again, the main thing here is the overall file size that ultimately you're going to be producing. But you can see I can choose from a range of video codecs that are available to me on my system, but also available to me based on the version of Resolve that I'm working on as well. If we choose format, for example, you'll see that we've got two choices to choose from here. We've got QuickTime and we've got MP4. So QuickTime obviously is producing a .mov file. MP4 will produce a file that has an MP4 extension. So it might seem a tiny distinction, but actually it's quite notable because you're actually producing a different kind of file in terms of what we would refer to as the file wrapper. So this is the sort of the information that surrounds the actual video and the audio essence within that. So here I can actually switch the format to MP4. And then when I click back in the codec, you'll see I've got a much reduced option here. So simply by changing the format, I can now only produce certain codecs in there as well. Well, in this case, actually MP4 is just a little bit more compatible across systems than just a QuickTime movie. So in this case, I would favor an MP4 using H.264 as the codec. QuickTime using H.264, yeah, not a huge amount of difference, but that wrapper is different as well. So yeah, just be aware of that. So I'm just going to choose MP4 from that. For the audio, same sort of thing. You've got an audio codec, but again, in this case, because we're choosing a preset, we don't really have much of a choice here. So it's going to be AAC. So it's compressed audio, a little bit more efficient than MP3, but still compressed in some way. And then the actual audio from the timeline, we can actually choose which elements we want to output here. So from the audio pop-up menu here, I'm actually outputting all the audio mixed together. Or I could choose an individual timeline track. So if I just wanted to output the dialogue or the music or something, then I could just choose that. So I could choose timeline track and actually specify the track number that I actually want to output. Or I could choose to output all of the timeline tracks, effectively all as sort of like little individual stems within the file. But generally we would choose to output the main so that everything is mixed together. Don't worry about the IAB track file. I believe this is something to do with Dolby Atmos. So unless you're doing high-end audio sort of object based, you know, all of this spatial audio stuff, and yeah, just leave it alone. So I'm just going to make sure I've got the main there. Now the other thing, of course, I promised is going back to resolution and frame rate. This is based on a preset, remember. So the preset was 1080p. So what the preset is assuming is that you are going to output a version of the video at 1080p. Now, the slight issue with that, of course, is that when we started this project, you'll remember that the footage I said was all 720. And the project, you'll remember, was set to 720. And that meant that the timeline that we were working on is 720. And you can just verify that within this project. If we click on this pop-up here, you can see that this project is indeed set to 720. So if you're working with a timeline that's a lower resolution than the output resolution, Resolve will warn you about that. So if you choose to add this to the render queue, it should actually, there we go, there is the warning. Are you sure you want to add to the render queue at a resolution larger than your timeline resolution? So in this case, the image processing starts off at the timeline resolution, and so you effectively be upscaling everything, which is not necessarily what we would want to do. So just something to bear in mind there. If your footage is lower resolution, don't think that you can just simply upscale it and everything's going to be wonderful. It will produce it. It will just be a little bit more, what's the phrase, compromised, I think is what I wanted to say. So I can cancel that. And then the resolution here, I can actually change that here from this pop-up menu. So we could choose 1280 by 720 HD 720p. For frame rates, I would always advise you to output the frame rate at the timeline frame rate, because that way you know that there's going to be no problems about interpreting different frames. The main problem that you have when converting video from one format to another is not necessarily the resolution, but it's actually the frame rate. The frame rate can cause a lot. The frame rate here is actually based on the timeline frame rate anyway, so 23976 is absolutely correct for this. So just be aware that ideally the resolution and specifically the frame rate should be the same as whatever you were working with in your timeline. And ultimately, when you set your timeline resolution frame rate, that should actually be based on where you're ultimately wanting to deliver it to. The only other thing to mention here is uploading directly to Vimeo. So if you do have those details already in the system that we just talked about in terms of the preferences, you can then choose to automatically upload that directly to Vimeo. Here you'll be asked to put in a title, a description, and whether or not or who that this video is going to be visible to. So whether it's only going to be me personally or anyone with a password or that sort of thing. So the usual sort of standard things that you would expect when submitting a video like this to that site. I'm not going to upload to Vimeo, but here, if I just click on the add render queue, what that will do is I'll actually submit that to the render queue, but it won't actually start the render. It'll give you a summary as to the file type that you're outputting, so forth, but that file is now ready and waiting to actually be created. In order to start it, you would need to hit the render all, but I'm not just going to do that just at the moment anyway. Okay, so with that in mind, that's submitted the first file to this render queue. What if you actually wanted to create a file that isn't necessarily included in the list of presets along the top? Now, if you actually look in the book for this, what they get us to do is actually to mark a clip. I think it's the St. Martin's shot. I think it's the second shot in the timeline here. They actually get us to mark that. And then what we do is we output this as a format called EXR. And EXR is used for sort of visual effects. And so you would hand that off to a visual effects artist who would then work on it a little bit more. EXR is actually a series of still images. Well, I mean, all video is ultimately a series of still images, but it is actually what we would refer to as an image sequence. So you rather than outputting a single file, a video file, you output a series of EXR images. So in that case, I'm not actually going to do that because I find that quite a specific use of this feature. Instead, what I'm going to show you is just how you can choose a different video format, different video codecs than you might otherwise need. So I'm actually just going to go back to the entire timeline for this. And here you can actually always customize any of these settings. I mean, you can actually customize the presets as you've seen here anyway. But if we click on this custom option here, you can see that, again, we've got a location, we've got a file name. So again, you can set these. So if I just choose browse, in the delivery, and in this case, I'm going to highlight it, highlight the name, and excuse me, and I'm going to choose to call this Age of Airplanes Master. So I wouldn't really think of an MP4 as a master file. It's more a delivery format for the internet, but H.264 is good quality, but it's not something that you kind of want to keep. You want to keep a better quality version of that in case you ever need to go back and maybe make other versions of it. So Age of Airplanes Master, and I'm going to save. Now, you'll notice it said MP4 there, and that's just simply because based on this custom setting here, you can see I've got the format is currently set to MP4. So file name and location, very straightforward, same as previously. When you choose the render here, though, make sure you choose single clip. Because again, remember, we can output a single file, which is ultimately what we want, or a series of individual clips. And it's generally the individual clips that you only use if you're sending the edit onto another system. So just make sure you've got single clip set. And then you've got 3 tabs here. You've got the video tab, you've got the audio tab, and the file tab, which just provides you a little bit of flexibility in the terms of the types of information that that file includes. So under the video, we would choose, yes, we do want to export the video, unless of course you wanted to just export the audio in that case. Make sure that's checked, and then you can choose the format. So here, if I click in this list here, you can see that we've got a number of different formats that we can choose from here. So we've got an overall QuickTime file, we've got our friend MPEG-4 there, we've got EXR that's there as well. We've also got DCP, so for digital cinema package. So if you need to actually output something to be screened in a cinema, then you can do that from within Resolve. But in this case, I'm going to choose, and there's EXR, by the way. So that's what the book would have you do. But I'm going to come down here and I'm going to choose this option here, MXF OP1A. So MXF is material exchange format. It's a format that's used widely sort of in the TV industry and by various other systems as well. So MXF OP1A. So that's what we're going to choose there. And again, you can see the options that we've got here. So within that format, you can see I can choose a codec. So all of the supported codecs are there for this format. And you can see that we've got quite a few there. Some of them are a little bit bizarre. This kakadu, it's almost like a parrot, isn't it? But we're going to choose DNX-HR, so DNX-HR for that. And the type is the quality of this this DNX-HR codec. So we're going to click in there, and we're just going to choose DNX-HR HQ. If you're on a Mac, you might want to choose ProRes. That could be another format. So you would choose QuickTime and then choose a ProRes codec, and you would have a similar choice. You would have things like ProRes 422HQ. You would have Proxy and LT and that sort of thing. So what we're choosing here is we're choosing an MXF format, a wrapper for this, and the type of codec we're using in there is DNX-HR at a particular quality level. The resolution and frame rate, again, are exactly the same. So in this case, we want it set to 720p, of course, otherwise we would get that warning again about outputting anything at a higher resolution. And again, the frame rate should be the same as the timeline. This export alpha, don't worry about that's if you've got any transparencies. So again, if you've got sort of titles or something like that, but the codec that you're outputting to would need to support that, and there's only a few limited number of codecs that would allow us to do that. In terms of the audio, if we go to the audio tab, again, you can choose to export your audio. You can choose to export and choose the codec, again, for certain formats. In this case, I've only got linear PCM. Linear PCM is often referred to as uncompressed audio. So you're not losing any quality. You're using the sort of the full audio information. So linear PCM is ideal for this. It's just going to be a bit bigger than AAC or MP3 or something like that. Don't worry about bit depth. But again, that's sort of the level of quality. Usually 16-bit is more than enough for what we need to do, but you can go 24 or 32-bit. And then we've also got the output track here as well. So we could choose the main stereo output, so again, the mix, an individual timeline track, or all of the timeline tracks. And a little difference here is if you actually wanted to output more than one track within this file. So you might want to output your main audio track, but then you can also add an additional track to this, and you might want to say, yeah, but I also want to output maybe the dialogue on its own or something like that. So you could specify the track number there, and you can add as many of these. I'm not sure if there's a limitation on this based on the format that you've chose, if I'm being honest, but you can add as many of these as you need, I believe. I'm just going to remove that because I only need to output the main here. So that's how you would customize your output settings. Under the file menu here, you do have the option here of adding things like file suffixes and subfolders and that sort of thing. Also, you can add digits to the file name. This is more important if you are outputting that image sequence that we talked about. So a series of still images, they would need to be labeled, image 00001, 00002, that sort of thing. So again, that's where that sort of thing comes in to be of use. But yes, under the file name here, it'll give you an idea, if you're going to output a huge file, how much of your disk space is currently being used where you're going to render it to, and how much should be free afterwards. Now, thankfully, I've got a fairly large hard drive here, and this is a tiny file that I would output. Of course, I could just hit the render queue, but I just want to show you one other thing just before we do. And that is, if I've gone through and I have created a custom rendering preset, and what I want to do is I might need to do this and output files to this format over and over and over again, then in the options menu for the render settings, you can actually choose to save as new preset. So if we click on this, and we'll give this a name, so we'll call this MXF DNXHR HQ. So again, you could call it whatever you want, uncompressed file output or whatever you want to call it. And then if we click OK, you'll now see that we now have that as a custom preset that we can easily select. And you can actually save as many custom presets as you need. So even if you've customized maybe the Vimeo one, you can actually keep adding to that list of custom presets. And again, you'll get a little triangle facing down if you've saved more than one. I'm just going to add this to the render queue very quickly. Just click on that to add it to the render queue, just to be able to add that there. Because again, another thing just to show you here, now that I've got a custom preset, if I click back in the options menu here, you can see down at the bottom there, it gives me an option for quick exports. So quick exports, and then any custom preset that I've got saved then appears as part of my quick exports. So I could choose that. And now can't access quick export from the deliver page. So let's just pop back to the edit page. And if we go to the file menu, choose quick export, you'll now see that I have actually got a new option here. And that is now enabling me to choose from whichever presets I've enabled. So again, this is a useful function in case you just need to very, very quickly produce a specific file type, and you just want to prefer to add it to the quick exports function. So again, any presets that you've got here would be listed. So it's useful to know that that you've got that format and whichever one you want to choose. So make sure you label it correctly, is my advice to you. So heading back over to the deliver page, we've got everything set up now. So all we need to do is we just need to hit the render all. Just make sure if you've got any of these jobs selected, then it will only render the selected job. So if you've actually added multiple jobs to the render queue, just make sure, and I've done this myself on a number of occasions, I'm rendering out an hour's project and I've got 3 different types of files that I'm producing. I've only got one of them selected, and I go away and I come back half an hour later and the damn thing should still be going, and it's not. So I've done that on a number of occasions. So just either make sure that you've got the jobs selected that you want, or none of the jobs selected, and in which case it should say render all. Thankfully, if you do have something selected, it will tell you how many it will render. So if you are expecting it to render 3 versions of the same movie, then, and it only says render 1, you know that something is not selected correctly. Also you'd need to do here is just hit render all, and at that point you'll notice that Resolve then goes and starts going through and rendering them, all of these clips. So I can't use the software whilst it's doing that, but once it has generated those clips, you can then see that this was completed here. Oh, it was completed in 5 seconds. This one was actually completed in 4 seconds on my system. Yours might take a little longer. But once we've got that, you can see I've got my 2 files, my master MXF file and my Age of Airplanes MPEG-4 file. Okay. Good. Good. So, I mean, that's probably a little bit more of an overall view of the deliver process than's necessarily covered in the book. The book is, as I say, it only covers around about sort of 6 or 7 pages in the book. I'm not sure if that's including the lesson review or not. So there's not an awful lot that's required from us, but hopefully that's of use just in choosing your right formats and things like that, and what you can and can expect from the deliver process in Resolve. Sure, and Diego, are we okay? Do we need to spend a bit of time on that? Covering anything else at all, or are we okay to move on?
We are okay to move on.
Awesome. Okay, great. So that was, as I mentioned, from the book, lesson 14. Moving on then, we will go to the last lesson in the book, which is lesson 15. And this is about media and database management. As I said, this is probably one of those subjects that is just, it's all a little bit boring and a little bit, not exciting. It's not as cool as Fusion or anything like that, but actually it is an important part of the process. So one of the things that we'll look at here is actually, when you're at the end of a project, what are the sorts of things that you can do? You've delivered the footage, you've delivered the final file for broadcast or upload for your client, but you're then left with a project, you're then left with all of this media in that project. What could or what should you do with it? Now, we've already talked about importing projects, and one of the things that we will think about here is what we've been doing elsewhere through Resolve as well. So you'll be aware that we've been, not only do we create our own projects, but we have been importing projects and linking to media files, or relinking to media files, I should say. We've also been importing timelines as well, DRT files. And the other thing that we've been working with is something called a DaVinci Resolve archive. And remember, the archive is actually not just the project file, but it's actually the project file and the media at the same time. So what we'll do is we'll just run through how you can actually create those elements yourselves, and why you might want to create something and why you might want to create something else. We will be looking at something called the Media Manager. We'll also be looking at archiving and restoring projects. Well, we already know how to restore a project and an archive via the project manager, but how do we create them? And on the back of that, actually understanding how Resolve sorts your projects and where it's storing them and how it's storing them, and how you can just make sure that you're building in a little bit of redundancy there in terms of the database, making sure you're backing up your database as well. So of course, it's all important in case you lose any of that information. So as I said, it's a bit of a, not necessarily the most exciting of subjects to talk about, but it is useful to understand how the system is working. Don't worry, after we've done this, we'll have a short break and then we'll come back, we'll do some exciting stuff. So we'll finish on a high, in other words. Let me go here. There we go. We're going to use the same timeline, the same project again, just because it's a useful reference. But in this case, what I'm going to do is just go back to the edit page rather than the deliver page. And I just want to point out two things that you can do within Resolve anyway, just before we get stuck into sort of media management. The first is maybe you're working with somebody who is, particularly in this day and age, is actually working remotely. So you might want to send them some information. And to make it as easy as possible, you don't want to send them all of the video files, the source media that your project uses. Maybe they've got a copy of the media. Similarly, somebody might want to send you the same sort of information. So you've got two choices here. The first is that you can actually just send the timeline, and the timeline is a DRT file. So in order to be able to export the DRT file of this timeline, if I go to the file menu, I can come down here to export, and you can see that I can actually export the timeline directly. You'll notice you can also export bins. This is a similar function. We haven't actually talked about that in this class, so we're really just going to focus on timelines for this. So if I just choose to export the timeline, this will enable me to choose where I'm going to export it to. So I'm just going to export it to the desktop. Again, you can give this a name. So I could call this, Age of Airplanes timeline. Hopefully it's all spelt right. Yes, looks like it. Choose the location for that. And then underneath here, you'll actually see the type of file that we're going to be creating. So from this pop-up menu here, you've got a lot of these different sorts of files that you can work with. Things like AAF files are used very much by Avid and Pro Tools. FCP XML files can be used. The older style FCP7 XML files are often used by Premiere, but the FCP XMLs are actually used by the newer Final Cut Pro. Don't go with EDL. There's no need to go with an EDL these days. But down at the bottom, you actually have DaVinci Resolve timeline files. Now, this is important that you actually choose this. If you're sending the timeline information to another Resolve editor or another Resolve user, then use the Resolve timeline files, because what the other files are doing is that they will translate the information in some way. And what that ultimately means is you lose information, it doesn't necessarily support everything that the software will do. Whereas the DaVinci Resolve timeline file, the DRT that we've been importing, will support absolutely everything that Resolve does. So audio mixes, grades, works with LUTs and things like that. It will include everything. So make sure it's the DaVinci Resolve timeline files. And then what you can do is you can just save that to a location. And that is a very, very small file. Depending on the size of the timeline, I should say, it's a relatively small file that you could then send via, a cloud transfer, or you could probably even email that sort of thing across, and then the destination user can actually import it into DaVinci Resolve 17, either into the free version or the studio version. And then providing they've got access to the media, that's very important, then they will be able to see your timeline as you left it when you exported it. So that's the first type of document that you can create other than a movie file. The next thing is you might want to export the project out. And again, the project is useful because it's not just the timeline that you've got, but it's all of the timelines. It's the clips that are actually within the project, not the media, but the actual clips within the project. It's the bins, it's the metadata that you've assigned to that clip. So there are all sorts of things within a project that aren't within a timeline. So it's a much more comprehensive document. From the file menu, you can export the project as it currently stands. So you could choose export project from here. Again, you would choose a location for it. You would give it a name. So I'll just call it Age of Airplanes project, and then save that. And again, here you can see I've got this document here. Let me just restart my little mouse cursor because he seems to have decided he's going to freeze on me again. Hey, there you go. So you can see that this is a DRP file, so a DaVinci Resolve project. Again, a relatively small file, bigger than a DRT because of course it's got much more information in it. But that actually is what you can still send that to somebody. They would still need the media files that you were using, and then they would need to use the relink function in order to be able to reconnect to their media. But otherwise that's the whole project. So those are the DRP files that we've been creating for this. So all of these are just sort of like, they're just documents that are referencing the actual media. What about the media itself? What can we do with that? Because ultimately, that media is actually sitting on your system, elsewhere on your system. It might even be spread over several drives, might be on network locations and that sort of thing. So if you go to the File menu, the other thing that you have here is something called your Media Management window, your Media Manager tool. So if we choose Media Management, so actually Resolve has a pretty robust media management system. You can see from the top, there are three main things that we can manage. You can either manage the entire project. So that's everything within the project. All the media files that are on your system relating to that project will be included. You've got timelines. So any timelines you have within your project will be able to be selected, and the media associated with those timelines will be included. I'll show you the differences in a second. Or finally, you've got any clips within your project. So it doesn't necessarily mean timelines, it will just mean the actual raw clips that you started with. And you can see that you've got use selected media pool or selected timeline clips. So again, if you've got selected media pool clips, you've got 3 clips selected, you can just media manage those based on this selection. All 3 of those options has effectively 2 options within that. You can choose to copy, so you would copy the original footage from your media drive into a new location. This is often referred to as consolidating. So you're bringing all of those disparate files together into a single location, which is easily manageable. Or you could transcode it. You can convert it into another type of format. This doesn't always make things smaller. It can actually make things bigger. But sometimes it's often used by post houses that might, favor a particular format, such as ProRes or DNX, for example. So you've got entire project here. So if I wanted to copy the footage for this, I could choose a destination for this, which I'm not going to worry about too much at the moment. And here I can actually choose, well, what do I want to copy? Do I want to copy all media within this project, just the used media? So if I've got 3 interviews of which I've only used 1, then it won't actually copy the footage that I haven't used or the clips that I haven't used. If I've used 1 frame of a clip, it will actually copy the whole footage. Or I can choose the used media and trim. Now, what this will do is it will actually take the clip and it will actually just use the portion of the clip that I've actually used in the timeline, plus and minus a few frames either side, what we refer to as handles, which in that case will actually mean that I've got a little bit of wiggle room in case I need to just tweak and edit at all. So here, for example, I could choose, if I chose all media, you can see that the current size for this project is 1.13 gigabytes. And the new size for this project will be 1.13 gigabytes, because of course I'm copying all of that source media. If I just choose the used media for this project, you can see that the current size of the used media is 930 megabytes. So again, about 3/4 of the size of the full media, because there are some clips here that we haven't used. I mean, you normally find that your used media versus your unused media is a much smaller proportion than just simply around about 3/4, because unless you've got a very, very tight shooting ratio, but normally I think I've got a shooting ratio of projects that I'm working on at the moment around about 100 to 1. So for every 100 minutes that are shot, you tend to use 1 minute because of reality show. But you can see again, I'm copying them across. Now, if I choose the used media and trim, keeping 1 second before and after the used portion of the clips, you can see the current size is 930, but the new size is now 554 megabytes. The downside of that is, of course, I'm actually losing the unused portion of the clips. So I can't then go back and say, yes, I need that full interview, because I won't actually have it. You're also always advised to relink to those new files for the project if you're creating them, particularly if you're doing this used media and trim, because you're creating new media files with different file names. If you're using used media, then that's not necessarily too much of a problem. For timelines, you've effectively got the same thing. I actually quite like this option now, because if I choose my Fairlight timeline here, and then I choose used media and trim for this. So here I've got my current size, here is my new size, and again, this is just for this this timeline this time. So this is why it's a different overall file size. Here in the browse, I'm just going to browse to the desktop I'm going to choose new folder. I'm just going to call it media managed. Choose to create that folder. So now what I can do is I can actually copy that media and it will actually trim it. So I'm going to be saving around about 50% of the overall size of that media. So let me start that process off. And it's done it pretty quickly on my computer. Again, depending on the speed of the computer, you may need to wait a little bit longer for that. But now when I come to this media managed folder on the desktop, see, there's my project. And inside that project, I've actually got copies of all of the media. Now, certain things such as this sound effect, you'll notice I've got multiple versions of the same file name, but it actually says 00100 because what it's doing is it's copying small sections of it, because the sound effect was actually a much longer file, of course. So it's actually sort of taken out the relative bits out of that. But it does actually have a DRT file in there. And the great thing about this is not only is it a smaller consolidated version of your project, but because it's got the DRT file in there, you can actually create a new version of the project. Sorry, you can actually create a new project, and then you can import that DRT directly into that new project, and it will actually relink all of the media together. So in this case, if I just come in here, create a new project for this, we'll call it Age of Airplanes Managed. So brand new project, completely from scratch. File, import timeline. If I go to my media managed folder there, Age of Airplanes, select the DRT, which is amongst all of the other files that it's produced. Choose to import that. Yes, I do want to change the project frame rate. And there you can see I've completely rebuilt the project. And that's actually then using that trimmed media. So I won't have access to the full audio clips, for example, or all of the full video clips, but I will have a little bit of handles. I'll have a little bit of wiggle room in case I need to. And of course, that's the sort of thing that I could then archive onto a hard drive, or other means of being able to keep that nice and safe, so that if the client comes back, I've always got the ability to be able to sort of pick and choose the bits and pieces that I want, as opposed to a single file, which is you can't sort of pick apart afterwards. You literally are limited to the amount of media that you've got within that file. So that's my managed version of that.
Hi, Chris.
Yes, mate.
Can you show us how can you import the DRT?
Yes, absolutely. So if you've created the managed version, so if you've used the Media Manager on that timeline, if you just go into your project manager, just create a new project. So just a brand new, completely blank project. And then in that blank project, go to the File menu and choose Import Timeline. So because it's a DRT file, it would be, you need to import the timeline for that. Navigate to your Media Managed folder for the project for that, and inside there, there'll only be one file that should be active, unless you've selected multiple timelines, in which case it will output a DRT for each of those timelines. Select that DRT or the DRT that you want, and then choose Open. Currently, you can only import one DRT at a time, I think, but choose to open that and it'll actually import the timeline for you. Now, what you won't have is you won't have all of the bins, you won't have all of the custom metadata that you've added to those files in the previous project. So you won't have any of the organization that you might want. That would all be within the project file itself that you would have to open and then relink the media to, and you wouldn't be able to relink necessarily to the trimmed clips. That's another limitation that you would need to be aware of. Okay, so that is that's the media manager. That's how you would manage all of the individual media files. I mean, you could copy them yourself, but let the system do it because it knows what it's doing, and it's pretty robust at doing that. But the other thing about this is being able to manage your projects, manage your files, is actually understanding the database that you have within Resolve, and actually how that works. So for this last step in this part of the session, let's go directly to the project manager. So open up the project manager. It doesn't matter if you've got a media managed version of your project. We're not really interested in that directly as such. But the project manager it does exactly what it says. It allows you to manage your projects above and beyond what we've done so far. And we can use the project manager. We've been using it for actually importing projects, importing archives, but you can also use the project manager to export projects and export archives as well. So here, for example, if I wanted to, let's go back to glass blowing. You remember glass blowing all the way from Monday. Let's say I wanted to make that available to somebody else. If I right click on that project in the project manager, I can actually choose a few other options here. So I can choose to export the project itself as a DRP. It's exactly the same as going via the file export project option. Or I can export the project with any stills. Remember, those are gallery stills. So that will include any grades that I've created and any LUTs that I have used within that project. And that's important because if I've got LUTs and grades, they're not necessarily included within the exported project. But it will create the DRP as well. The other thing that we've been doing is restoring project archives, but you can also choose to export a project archive. Now, by exporting a project archive, you will create a DRA. So the folder with the extension .dra, you can take that and you can give it to somebody else, but it will include the media, and it will include all of the media for that project. So it's not picking and choosing, it's not trimming, it'll just take whatever media you're using, it will just copy it. Yes, so so quite often the project archives are going to be much bigger, but the advantage of that is that you have access to absolutely everything within the project. So here I would choose to export the archive. I'll choose a location for this. I'll just go straight to the desktop. And here it'll archive to, so Taryn Jane Glassblowing is the name of the archive that it's going to create in that location. I'm going to include any media files and any render cache files that I've used. So you may remember that we used a Fusion title in that project, and that will have rendered and it will have cached that into that media storage location. So if I've got a lot of render files, sometimes it might be useful to actually include them. But equally, if you do have a lot of render files, it can actually increase the size of your archive quite considerably. So you might want to uncheck that, because render cache can actually be recreated anyway. It's not vitally important that you keep that. We haven't talked about proxy media in this, so don't worry about that. It's not covered in this class. If you want to know a little bit more about proxy media, there's more information in the editor's guide to DaVinci Resolve 17 regarding the use of proxy media. But all we do is choose OK, and then what happens is it then copies all of those files from their original locations, again, collating everything together, compiling everything together into a single location. So now I actually have my DRA here, and that will include the project file and the source media for that project file. So again, that's going to be slightly larger. Well, it's going to be a lot larger than just the single project file on its own. But it does mean that you should have all of the media needed in order to be able to restore that into your project manager, and actually it will automatically relink to it. That's how we actually started that lesson on Monday. So those are other things that you can do with your project manager. Last thing to mention about this is that if you're familiar with other systems like After Effects or Premiere or Final Cut or Avid, you may be familiar with the idea of a project file, a standalone project file that that you can manage on the system. Not all of them have single project files. I appreciate that, but they tend to be separate from the main application, or tend to be able to be managed separately from the main application. Resolve is not like that. Resolve actually uses a database to store its project files in, and that database is used by the system in order to create a robust environment for keeping that information in, and actually keeping large amounts of information in as well. So it is worth knowing how the database works, and also where the database is located, and how you can create your own database. So up until now, all we've been looking at is the project manager. We haven't actually considered the database part of it. So in this case, over here on the top left here, you'll notice there is a button. It says next to projects here, it says show and hide databases. Thank you very much, guys. And my little mouse is obviously having a little bit of a problem again. Here, but we've got it highlighted there, but that's the button that we're after there, show and hide databases there. So if we click on that button, that actually opens up the databases that you've got available to you. Now, on your system, if you hadn't created your database, which, you know, why would you, unless you knew that they were there, you'll actually be using the default database location, which is actually called local database. You'll notice that actually what I've been doing throughout this is actually worked in a database that I created prior to the class called Beginner's Guide. That's where all my projects are actually stored. You can actually, if you've got more than one database available to you, you can actually switch between those databases, and you can see that my local database is completely empty of any projects. But if I switch back to the Beginner's Guide database, I've then got that database there. Now, how you use the databases is entirely up to you. Generally, I would use the databases for you know, different sorts of projects that I was working on, maybe for different clients. So I might have one client for one database and another database for another client, for example. I actually tend to keep all of my main projects in a single database, and then I've got those personal projects, which includes, you know, all the stuff that I like to publish myself, but it's not like sort of, you know, work related at all. Tend to record lots of gaming things and edit them together and share them amongst my friends and that sort of thing. But, you know, that I tend to keep in a separate database, well away from the work stuff, as an example. So here on this database here, if you were to right click on this, you can actually choose to reveal this in this case in the Finder, or I think it's show in Windows, whatever it is in the Windows version. But I can actually choose to reveal this in the Finder, and this will actually open the database location. In this case, you can see it's Beginner's Guide August 2021 database. This is a folder I personally created. Now, if I go inside there, you see that we've got a series of other folders, but there's nothing in there really that is something that I can use as a human being. This is all Resolve's territory. So don't go messing around in here. If you dig down deep enough, you will come across things that you go, projects. These are my projects, and if I open that out, there's something in there, but it's not a project that we would use like a DRP or something like that. So please, please, please don't think you can just go into this and just start to pull things out. It doesn't really work like that. My advice is stay away from the database. Do all of your managing of projects and exporting of your projects via the project manager. But what you can do is you can actually create a new database. So let's have a look how we can do that. So there's actually two types of database that you can create within Resolve. You can create a disk database or a Postgres SQL database. The easiest type of database to work with is the disk database. If you wanted to share projects across multiple editors that can actually access those projects at the same time, known as collaboration, then you would need to use a Postgres SQL database. But otherwise, it's a disk database that we want to work with. So down at the bottom here, we can choose new database. And in the new database window, you can choose between disk or Postgres. So we're going to choose disk. You can actually add images to your database. So if you want to put like little images in there as visual references, so you put logos, for example, or something like that, then you can do that. We need to give this database a name though. Now, the rules for this are there can be no capital letters, there can be no special characters, there can be no spaces in the name of your database. Hence, beginner's guide actually doesn't have any apostrophe, or it doesn't have a space between this, which is a little bit bizarre because local database has both of those things. It has uppercase and it has spaces, but hey, that is the preserve of the local database. So if we come in here, we just type in something like, I don't know, like new database. So again, if you try and put an uppercase letter in, or you put a space in there, it won't accept it, But now we need a location for this database. So the databases themselves can actually be kept anywhere on your system. They can be kept on a local drive, it can be kept on a remote drive, it can actually even be kept in somewhere like a Dropbox folder, or it can actually be kept on a network location somewhere. So, you know, you're not limited to anywhere on the system particularly, other than ideally it should be on a fast location. You don't want to really store it on a slow drive at all. So under the location button here, we would choose to browse for a location, and you can set the location on a location that's already been created in terms of a new folder. You can even create a new folder in this window anyway, but the trick here is to make sure it's a completely empty folder. So I tend to create my databases on my documents folder, in my users folder. So if I go into documents, you'll see there's a folder in there called Resolve Databases. And inside there, that's where the beginner's guide was. So I'm going to create a new folder in here. I'm just going to call it new database. I will try and spell them correctly. It's probably a good idea. And what I tend to do, and this is just a, thank you very much. What I tend to do is I actually, and this is a personal thing that I do, I actually usually put the initials DB at the end. Now that just tells me that this is a database folder. So if I'm browsing through these files and I see a folder and it's got the initials DB at the end, I know it's a Resolve database. So I should be very careful as to actually how I treat it. So I create that folder, brand new empty folder, and then choose open. You won't be able to create a database in a folder that's got anything else in it. And then you just choose create, and that will create you a new database, and it will automatically switch to that database. And now you can see that you've now got multiple databases that you can actually switch between. And I go back to my beginner's guide database because that's where all my projects are in for today. You can copy projects between databases. It's not as simple as just simply dragging them, but you can use shortcuts. So you can use the copy and paste shortcut. So you would select a project. So for example, if I wanted this project in a new database, I can copy that using Command C. So I've pasted a copy of it, so I can't just undo that. So let me just delete that project. Be very careful about deleting a project because once it's gone, it is gone. If I take that project, I press Command C to copy it, Control C on a PC, obviously. Go to my new database, and then Command V will paste a copy of that. So you can copy and paste projects between databases, but you can't just simply drag and drop them. The other thing just to mention about databases just before we have our short break is if the database becomes corrupted or becomes lost for any reason, then obviously you will lose all of those projects. So it's useful to be able to export your projects out occasionally to keep them safe. The other thing that you can do is you can also choose to back up your database. So this button here allows you to back up the database, and this will actually create a version of the database in a single file. So you don't need to then, keep track of all of those disparate files. So if I choose to back this up, it will actually ask me to give this a name, but I will just simply stick this on the desktop for the moment. So I will choose save. This might take a bit of time depending on the size of your database. This is a very small database. So I'll just choose to back up, and it has done. So now when I go onto my desktop, you'll see that it's got beginner's guide .resolve, and it's got the extension .diskdb. So this is actually now a backup of all of that database, all of the projects, not the media, all of the projects within that database. So if I needed to, maybe my computer hard drive crashes or something like that, if I've got a backup of that database, then I can always restore it. So in this case, to restore a database, you would use this restore function here, and it would ask you for that database file. You would open that, and then it would ask you to name the database and give it a new location. So it will actually it won't restore it to an existing database, it will actually create a new database and restore that database to it. So I'm not going to do that just at the moment. If you do have a folder with a database already in it, you can actually choose to connect to that folder. So if you've got a database, but you don't want it to actually appear here in this list, you can actually right click on it and choose to disconnect it. When you disconnect it, of course, you won't be able to access any projects within that database, but you can then reconnect later on, as we just talked about. So you can choose to connect to the database. In this case, you'll be asked to give the database a name. It doesn't have to be the name that it was previously. It could be something else entirely, and it doesn't have to be the name of the folder. So it's a name that you want to actually give here. So in this case, I will call this Resolve Beginners Class August 21. So again, no uppercase, lowercase, no spaces. So I've used underscores instead. We'll hit browse. We'll go to my documents folder. Sorry, we'll go to my home, and then we'll go to my documents folder. There is all databases. There is the database, which I shall open and then connect to that. And all of my projects are now back. Excellent. So that is your lesson 15 in your book, Media and Database Management. So importing and restoring projects we've already been doing, importing timeline files we've already been doing right the way throughout the course. So you should be very familiar with that, but creating them in the first place, that's what this lesson has also just covered. So being able to export to DRT, being able to export to DRP, being able to export to DRA. Working with the media manager to ensure that your media is copied appropriately and correctly, and then also creating those DRA files via the project manager. And finally, just understanding how projects are stored within your database, connecting to your database, creating a new database, and also finally backing up your database. Sherwin, Diego, are there any questions or anything that we might need to spend a few minutes addressing?
I think we're pretty good with questions.
Cool. Excellent. We try and be as thorough as we can be. So let's take a 15-minute break, 5 minutes, please. So the usual 15-minute break, we'll come back and we shall do some fun editing in the cut page and how the cut page is different from the edit page. But we will also discuss the exam as well. So not a huge amount to do to finish off the week. So 15-minute break, please. Let's be back by just before 10 to the hour. Thanks very much. Okay, so here we are. We are in the final straight. Yes, guys, this is it. We are approaching the finish line. But just before we do, there's a couple of things just to leave you with. We will get to the exam, but we did promise that we would visit every single page of DaVinci Resolve. And there's one page that's still outstanding, and that's the cut page. Now, the cut page is very interesting because it approaches editing from a completely different standpoint than we've been looking at with the edit page. Think of the edit page as kind of the way that we traditionally edit video on a computer. But the cut page is a different way of being able to edit. It doesn't necessarily mean to say it's better. It doesn't necessarily mean to say it's worse. But the cut page has one primary purpose, and that's to edit quickly and to allow you to edit as fast as possible. To achieve that, what it tries to do is it actually tries to remove redundancy and the sort of what I often refer to as minutiae of editing. If you think about the sorts of things that we've been doing in the edit page, pretty much since the moment we opened Resolve, we're having to constantly kind of juggle the interface to a certain degree. If you've been working on a laptop or a small resolution screen, you may have found things just that little bit difficult. The cut page aims to remove an awful lot of that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to edit a short promo together for an outdoor retail store. In actual fact, we can thank Sherwin for this footage. This is one of Sherwin's projects, which is donated to the cause. So it's great to be able to use something like this. And there we go, hearts all round. And what we'll be doing is we're going to look at the cut page pretty much on its own, but you can actually hopefully appreciate what the cut page does and how it does it, because you have that understanding of what we've been doing editing wise in the edit page. This is why I always leave the cut page to later in the class rather than do it first as it is in the book, because you've now built up an understanding of the sorts of things that we would do when we're editing. in general, and how the cut page can differ from that. So the one thing I would get you to try and keep in your minds here is that the cut page is there so that you can work as fast as possible. There's a reason why this lesson is actually called high-speed editing, and that's because that's the main focus of the cut page. Just before we actually dive into it, the other thing just to mention about the cut page is that sometimes there's a discussion as to who the cut page is for. Is it for experienced editors? Is it for YouTubers? Is it for those bloggers that need to turn stuff around? Is it for news journalists and that sort of thing? And the answer is, it's actually for everyone. It's for everyone who edits. It's just that it approaches editing in a different way. But that doesn't necessarily mean to say if you're editing a feature film or a reality documentary or something like that, that you can't use elements of the cut page, because you can dive in and out of the cut page or any page in Resolve as you need to. You just simply pick and choose the elements that you want to use. So what we'll be looking at here is we're going to start a new project. We are going to be looking at importing media in the cut page. We're going to use the new source tape feature so that we can understand how the cut page differs from reviewing your source media than the kind of the clicking and opening each clip in the source viewer in the edit page. Looking at the editing functions, a lot of which you'll be familiar with, but some of which the cut page has unique access to. And one of those is something called source overwrite, which we'll look at a little bit later on. But we'll do everything down to audio mixing. We'll be putting graphics on this. We'll be putting titles on it. And finally, we will quick export him out. So we have a challenge on our hands. Let's get stuck in. If you haven't already got Resolve open, could you open him up and go into your database that you've been working with all of your other projects? If you want to create a new database and you want to actually work within that database for this project, that's perfectly valid as well. But in this database here, I'm actually going to create a new project, and I'm going to call it OMO Quick Cut. OMO Quick Cut. OMO stands for Organ Mounting Outfitters. So hence the OMO moniker there. I'm going to create that brand new project. We're not going to worry about any settings or anything like that. Instead, we're just going to go straight across to the cut page. Now, first thing, of course, is we need some media that we can start to edit with. So obviously we have no clips in our media pool just at the moment. So you might be tempted to maybe go import something from the media page, and that's not a bad start. But actually the cut page has got some dedicated import functions. First of all, there are two import functions. Firstly, you can import individual media clips into the cut page, or you can import folders. And remember, we can always import folders anywhere, and they will be imported as bins. So that's what we're going to do here. So import a folder. Go to your beginner's guide lessons. Again, this is on the desktop for me. It's becoming a bit of a busy desktop. I don't quite like that. I always like to keep the desktop quite clean. So go into your beginner's guide lessons. Remember, this was lesson 1 in the book. We just didn't do it as lesson 1. So go into the folder called lesson 1. Select the folder called OMO footage, and what's inside this is actually a series of folders which actually have footage inside them. So you can see a series of movie files, a series of QuickTime files there. But just select the OMO footage folder. You don't need to select the individual folders inside there. Click open, and you get your warning about your project frame rate. The selected clips have a different frame rate to the project. Remember, the default for the project is 24 frames a second, but this footage is actually 23,976. So let's change the settings of that. And we've now got a series of bins within our project. Okay, so one of the things that's probably noticeable about the media pool here in the cut page is that actually it's one of the rare instances of the media pool within Resolve where you don't actually have full access to everything that the media pool can do. For example, there's no sidebar where you can access different bins. So a lot of people tend to access the bins in the media pool in the cut page just by clicking the folder. So if I double click the interview folder, for example, I go inside that bin. But then it's not immediately obvious how I might come out of that bin. And actually one of the ways that you can do that is actually using this little trail along the top. So I'm in the interviews bin, but if I click back on the OMO footage, that takes me back out to the parent bin in that case. And that's one way of doing it. It feels a little bit clunky. A better way of doing it actually is via this bin list here. And this isn't a list of bins that you see as a sidebar. This is actually a list of the bins that you open up as a pop-up menu. So here you can actually access the bins. So let's go to the scenery bin, for example, in order to view the contents there. And then you can also go back to the OMO footage bin at the top. But the media pool in the cut page doesn't show smart bins, doesn't show those keyword bins. And that's because traditionally in the edit page, we would access a bin, smart bin or otherwise, and we would find the clips and we might live media preview with them, but ultimately we open them in the source viewer. But that's not how the cut page is designed to work. The cut page is designed to work in a specific way to do with the viewer. Now, if we turn our attention to the viewer on the right here, what we're actually looking at here is a single viewer rather than the two viewers we'd be familiar with in the edit page. And the viewer actually has three modes that we work with here. So the mode that we're in at the moment is the timeline mode. Now we don't have any timelines yet, so it's not showing us anything. We've also got a source tape mode, and we've also got a source clip mode. Now, the source clip is kind of like the source viewer in the edit page, but again, that's not how the cut page is designed to work. Instead, the cut page is designed to work in something called source tape mode. So make sure you're in the OMO footage bin and then click the source tape button. And two things happen. First of all, you actually see in the media pool, you see a flattened view of your project. This is all of the media from your project, every single clip that's in that bin that we're currently looking at. Yeah, and it's organized in the media pool, which we'll look at in a second. However, in the viewer, you can now see that you've actually got each of those clips is actually placed almost end to end. And you can see that some of those clips have audio, and these white lines represent the actual clips themselves, the start and end of them. I can now scrub using this playhead through all of the footage within my project. Look at that. I can actually just scrub all the way through it. Yeah. Now this is how the cut page is designed to be used. You can also see that as I scrub through the footage in the source tape, can you see how it's also highlighting the clip in the bin in the media pool? You can also use your up and down arrow keys to navigate between the different clips. So you can quickly jump up and down through those clips. And there's also another way in which you can browse the footage within the source tape, and it's using this button here. This is called your fast review button. And what this does is when you click it, it will actually start to play the source tape, but it will play the source tape depending on the speed. It will play the speed of the source tape depending on the duration of the clip that we're actually viewing. Longer clips get played quicker than slower clips, which means on average, each clip takes the same amount of time to review. So now what I'm doing is I'm now reviewing all of the footage using that fast review. So you can see these shorter clips are actually playing slightly slower. Longer clips will play quicker.
Ready.
So I'm very quickly reviewing all of the footage. It's actually, it's quicker even than actually shuttling through. It's quicker sometimes than actually live media preview. I can actually sit back here and I'm getting an overview of what footage I've got. To stop that, all you need to do is just press the stop button or just press K or spacebar on your keyboard in order to stop the fast review. JK&L works exactly the same in the cut page as it does in the edit page. In actual fact, you can go quicker in the cut page by tapping L or J multiple times. So you can see here 4 times normal speed, 8, 16, 32, 64 times normal speed. So you can't go that fast in the edit page. But the source tape also works on the order of the clips in the media pool. So currently, you can see I've got these clips ordered in one way. If you click the sort menu here at the top, remember we talked about the sort menu in the media pool before. Click the sort menu here, you can actually see that we've got a very focused way of organizing this. The cut page doesn't focus on all of the metadata. You can still use all of the metadata, but it doesn't focus on all of the metadata by default. It focuses on the most useful parts of the metadata. And you can see at the moment, what we have is we actually have the footage sorted by time code. Come down here and choose clip name, for example. Now, when you do that, all of the media is rearranged based on the first letter of the clip. And you can see it's now actually in groups here. So you can see all of the M clips are together, all of the O clips are together. And what that also does is it also changes the order of the source tape. The playhead is still on the same frame of the same clip, but it actually has changed position within the source tape. So you can see here the interviews are now much earlier in the source tape than they were before, and all of the other footage is much later. Again, it's still highlighting the clip as we're scrubbing through the source tape. And another order that we can have is based on the order of the bin that the clips are in. So click in the sort media by button again, and then choose bin. And now all of the footage is in the order of the bins that they are in. So again, we now have a different order for this footage completely. How cool is this? Hopefully you can see just how useful that the cut page is and how it takes a different approach to how material is organized. You don't need to painstakingly go through and put all the clips into a bin. You can do, but you don't have to. And then you can just simply sort them. Now, the other thing is that the source tape is actually showing me all of the footage within the project. And this project is relatively short and straightforward, but you can imagine that lots of projects aren't as tightly compacted as this project. A lot of footage just, kind of goes to waste anyway. So another thing to bear in mind with the source tape is that you don't have to view all of those clips at the same time. In actual fact, you can narrow the source tape down just by simply selecting, in this case, the bin that the footage is in. So here, if you click in the bin list at the top of the media pool and come down to interviews, select that, you're now looking at just the footage in the interview bin, and the source tape is only showing you the footage within that bin and any other bins that you happen to have within there. In this case, there isn't any. So it's just showing me the footage on that bin. So this is one way of being able to narrow down the footage that you're looking at. Let's just try one more bin. Click in the bin list, choose the store bin and have a look at that footage. This is how the cut page is designed to work, not on an individual clip-by-clip basis, but based on source tape. Okay, of course, what we need is we need a timeline in order to put this edit together. So go to the File menu, choose New Timeline from the File menu. This will create a new timeline in exactly the same place, that in exactly the same way that the edit page does. So we can actually choose to use the project settings, which we know are correct, or we can uncheck that and we can use our own custom settings. Let's change the name of this timeline to OMO Promo. OMO Promo. Leave all of the other settings to their defaults. So we're going to create a stereo track, empty timeline, one video and one audio track. And then choose Create. Now by default, the cut page always creates new timelines in the same location. Remember, in the edit page, it would always create it in the selected bin. But here in the cut page, it actually creates it at the root of the project. So in this case, actually, you need to come out of source tape. So just go into timeline mode for the viewer. And this means that we're actually now looking at the top level of the project. And you can see that we've got our OMO footage, but we've also got the actual timeline that we've just created. So the cut page will always create a timeline at the top layer of the project. So again, you don't need to worry about where it is. You'll always be able to find it. However, we now need to go into the source tape in order to start editing this footage together. So let's go straight back to the source tape, by this time using a keyboard shortcut. Q on your keyboard, Q opens up the source tape, and press Q again and it will actually switch to your timeline. So Q opens source tape or back to the timeline. So if you just press Q however many times you need to go into your source tape, if it does take you into your source clip, you can press Shift Q in order to switch between source clip and source tape. So again, Shift Q switches between source clip and source tape. And let's navigate to the interviews bin. So we're now looking at all of the interviews. Now, one of the things that we want to do is obviously work through the interviews, and we want to start to edit them together. Remember, this is about high-speed editing. One of the things that we're constantly doing in the edit page is we're actually maybe constantly adjusting the timeline. We might be adjusting the heights of the timeline tracks. We might be moving between a close-up view in the detail view or full extent view. Well, the cut page does away with all of that, because the cut page timeline actually has two views. The topmost slightly narrower view here is actually the equivalent of your full extent zoom in the edit page. It will always show you the beginning to the end of your project, no matter how long it is in terms of the timeline. So you can actually display 15 seconds in here, or you can display 3 hours. Yep, it will display it in the same way. Below that, you actually have a zoomed in view of your timeline for those detailed views. So you don't need to switch between the full extent zoom and the detail zoom. You've already got both views. I tend to use the top view in order to navigate the timeline, and then the bottom view I use for doing, those tiny little edits, those little detailed trims that we need. The other thing that we tend to do a lot in the edit page is resize the timeline, resize the viewers. To a certain extent, you can do that in the cut page, but this is one of my favorite buttons in the cut page. This button here, 3 lines. It looks as though it's sort of like just sort of a regular innocuous button. This button allows us to resize the whole interface together. It says resize timeline, but if you click on that, you can drag the timeline up and down and see how it resizes all of the interface together. So you only really need one control in order to be able to resize the timeline. Also, if you've got multiple timeline tracks, particularly in the lower area, then those timeline tracks will always be resized to fit the area that you give it. So if you need to see a little bit more detail in the tracks, you just need to increase the height of the timeline. Again, this is removing redundancy, removing that minutiae of the edit page. Okay, so what have we got here? We've got an interview here. This is with Chris Lang. He is the owner of Organ Mountain Outfitters. And I believe, I think, Sherwin, are you the interviewer for this? I think I recognize your voice.
Yes,
There you go.
I'm actually
So,
not a person. I'm just a voice. So.
just a voice. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So the disembodied Sherwin is here as well. Now, of course, I can scrub through all of this footage, but I'm actually just going to listen to this first interview clip that's here. So I can just start to play that back as normal, use my JKL keys or my space bar. So I'm just going to play it back just so that we can all listen to this first clip.
Okay, so tell me about yourself and where we are. Sorry.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Organ Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
So what is Organ Mountain Outfitters?
Organ Mountain Outfitters is a lifestyle and outdoor brand that not only promotes the outdoors, but also gives back at the same time to our communities that we live in. And so with every purchase, we donated lunch to local schools, and we donated over 100,000 lunches so far.
Fantastic. Love that. I can see that Sherwin, he's got the incisive questions of the interviewer down pat. So that's good. We get to the heart of the matter. So he tells us who he is and he tells us what they do. And he also tells us that they have this wonderful program where they're helping to give back to the community and providing meals for school children. Wonderful. I think that's a great thing to do. We're going to take that entire clip and edit it into the timeline. Now, one of the things that we would do normally is set in and out points, but just make sure the playhead is anywhere over that first clip. Anywhere over that first clip. And then click the append button here. Here is all the editing functions that we've got. We don't have time to explore all of them, but you know what an append edit is. So click that, and you've now got that clip into your timeline. Notice the top part of the timeline is showing me the whole clip. The lower part of the timeline is showing me a zoomed in version of that clip. Normally, what we would now do on the edit page is probably play that back in the timeline and start to sort of finesse it a little bit. But the cut page isn't designed to do that. Instead, you'll notice the source tape is still active, because the cut page encourages us to put things together first and then take a look at the timeline and do all your trimming afterwards. So we're going to actually just assemble all of the bits of soundbite that we need here. So for this, we're actually going to go to the fourth interview clip in this source tape. So you could use the down arrow key to jump between those different clips. It'll take you to the first frame of each clip. Or here in the media pool, click on the fourth clip. And that will take you, just click once, don't double click. Just click once in order to take you to that in the source tape. And here we need to listen to this interview and we need to listen for those sound bites. So I will give you an option. I will give you the opportunity to go and listen to these as I'm working through them. So first of all, let me just play forwards.
We want people to experience the Southwest.
So we want people to experience the Southwest. That's where I want to come in.
So lots of scenarios. We want.
So I'll come back, turn on audio scrubbing. In. So I for in. We want people to experience the Southwest. So in on the beginning of the fourth clip. If you're finding it difficult with your J, K, and L keys, maybe you haven't quite got into the rhythm of it, you do have your jog control here, which works really well.
We want people to know
because it will give you a close-up view of the waveform and then place your in point in. So we want to play through this, and I think the outward is where he says landscapes.
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. There's nothing like it that I have personally ever experienced, whether it's the community, the culture, the food, the landscapes.
Out. And with the in and the out point set, you append. So you can come here and click the append button again. Again, source tape still stays active. So we're going to play forwards and we're listening for the next sound bite.
I can honestly say it's changed my life. And it's given me a family in a way that I didn't have, growing up. And to me, that's really special. That's really unique. And our brand is just really a reflection of our community and who we are.
Our brand is really a reflection of our community and who we are. That is the next soundbite, and that needs to be appended. Our brand, who we are, in, out. By the way, don't worry too much about trying to get these exact. Yes, if you hear it, just add your in point, add your out point, because we're going to refine them anyway in a few seconds. We've got another sound bite in this clip to find. It's right at the very end.
And so that's why, as we're going forward, we're really encouraging people to not only get outdoors, but to also get back at the same time. And so how do we embody that? And the only way to do that is to experience it. And
so the in point is the only way to do that is to experience it. The only way to do that. And I'm going to play forwards until he finishes his sentence. He says, experience the Southwest. And then I'm just going to wait until he starts to blink.
the only way to do that is to experience it. And that's why we say experience the Southwest.
There's his blink. I'm going to jog backwards a couple of frames and set the out point just before he blinks. Append. One more soundbite. We have one more soundbite to find. This is in the second interview clip. but it's quite far into the clip. So if you select the second interview clip in the media pool, just click once. That takes us to the start of that clip. So we're here. And it's towards the end. It's actually around about this part of the waveform here. So I'm just going to move the playhead right the way through it. And I'm just going to play from there. And this is what I'm listening for.
And hear their stories and tell our stories, and that's what really inspires us. And
that's what really inspires us.
so and that's what really.
So again, it's around that last little clump of waveforms there. Now the challenge with this is he says that twice. That's
what really.
That's what really. So the challenge is, what we want to do is try and find the beginning of the second that's. I know, it's pretty tough, isn't it? You can do it, takes a little bit of time, but again, the cut page comes to your rescue.
That's.
So I've just stopped on the second that, or where I think. I'm going to add an in point. Now I can come in here with the jog and I can scrub that to try and find the bit of the waveform. But here, this allows me to actually scrub the in point. So this tool here allows me to adjust the in point as I'm moving backwards and forwards over the waveform. So I can click and hold. There. I'm now between the two that's. And I don't need to do anything else other than leave it. So click on that bracket there and you can scrub the in point. There's also the equivalent on the right for the out point as well, if you need to reset, if you need to scrub the out point to find the beginning or end of a phrase. But now I'm just going to play that soundbite to the end.
That's what really inspires us. And we take that inspiration and we bring it back to the store, and that's really where the design process starts.
The design process starts, out, append. So I don't need this trim window open anymore. So I'm just going to close that down with that little X there. Switch between the timeline and the cut and the source tape, just to clear that window. There's a few things about the cut page that sticks occasionally. I'll be honest. But now we've got the sound bites in, we can now turn our attention to the timeline. So I'm just going to click here on the timeline viewer anyway. Remember, if you're in the source tape, you can just press Q to do that. And again, you've got this upper timeline area here, which is showing me the whole timeline from beginning to end, and this lower timeline area, which is showing me my detail zoom. So I'm just going to grab the playhead in the upper timeline and move it back to the beginning. Now you'll remember that we just took the whole of this clip. Yes, we didn't bother setting any in or out points. So now we need to think about sort of cutting it down a little bit. So I'm just going to play forward through the timeline, and there's an awful lot of silence before Sherwin asks his question.
Tell me about yourself.
But we're not interested in
And where we are.
Sherwin's question.
My name is Chris Lang.
So we want to find the bit where Chris starts to introduce himself, somewhere around there. And looking at this lower timeline here, you can see I can quite easily see where the waveform is, where he starts to speak. So he laughs here, and then there's a breath here. We just want to start the clip at that point. So position your playhead, or just play through the clip until the playhead is actually just before that piece of waveform there. By the way, the lower timeline actually doesn't work by moving the playhead. You actually move the content underneath the playhead. You can switch that using this button, but I tend to just leave it alone myself. You have a free playhead. So with the playhead in the right place, let's come up here to this button here. This is your split clips button, not eraser. So split clips, click, that splits the clip. Select the first part of the clip, either in the upper or lower timeline. It really doesn't matter. And then hit the delete key, and that will delete it out. No special modifier needed for rippling. No, because everything that you do in the main track, on this first track in the cut page, automatically ripples. We're going to play it through. We're going to get Chris's introduction.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
So after he's told us that they're in New Mexico, that's where I'm going to stop. Now, of course, what he would normally do, well, what he would do anyway, because it's pre-recorded and of course it won't change. What he will then go on and do is talk about the lunches that they give to the community. Now, that's great. It's wonderful, but it's not for this video. So we're actually going to lose that line. So there's a little bit of a challenge for you to re-edit this footage. There's far more of the interview than we're going to use today. Re-edit the footage at some point, showing, you know, with him talking about what they're doing for their community, but not for this video. So we're going to add another edit point here. You can click the split clips button again, or if you right click the header in the lower timeline playhead, right click the top, of the lower timeline playhead, you'll actually get a wheel that'll allow you to select the split clips. Or you can use a keyboard shortcut. Command B will split the clips, select the second part of the clip and remove it from the timeline. This is what we mean by high-speed editing. If you now press the / key, so remember the / on the keyboard plays around the current playhead.
And Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because
we're listening. Have we got a good edit?
And Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because
and if you have, great. If you haven't, you can adjust it. No need to go into any trim edit mode here, because the timeline on the video on the first track will actually automatically ripple. So this means I can go straight in and you can trim in either the upper or lower timeline. I tend to find it's easier in the lower. Move your mouse over whichever side that you need on the edit and you can click to select it, and then you can start to trim and you can see how that timeline is automatically rippling. One great thing that you've also got here in the cut page that you do not have in the edit page is this button here. This is called your audio trim button. It is to the right of your snapping button. It's here, audio trim. If you turn that on, when you trim a clip that's got audio, you get a big waveform display. so you can see exactly how you're trimming that.
And Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because
Go down to the next edit point, preview that.
the landscapes. Our brand is just really a reflection of
I'm happy with that. But if I wasn't, I could come in here and I could trim that. Next edit point, /
our community and who we are. The only way to do that is to experience it.
Again, I'm happy with that. This is probably the first time I've ever been happy with these edits so far.
Our community and who we are. The only way to do that is to experience it.
Go to the next edit point and hit the / key again.
Experience the Southwest. That's what really inspires us. And we take that.
And that was the beginning of that very tight edit where he said that's. So again, you can come into the lower timeline and you can again clearly see where that second that starts.
Experience the Southwest. That's what really inspires us. And we take that.
So I'm just going to give everyone a moment just to catch their breath, work through that interview. Yeah, don't spend too long thinking about it, but click and drag with the audio trim on just to refine each of those audio edits. You're not interested in the pictures will jump anyway. Okay, don't worry if you feel as though you've run out of time there and I'm moving on. If you haven't quite got it all finessed, don't worry, because you can finesse it as you're going along anyway. Yes, so you can always go back, you can always tweak it, and you can always refine it anyway. So don't worry if you feel as though I'm moving on too quickly. One of the other things that we did, of course, on the edit page was we moved clips around. We changed the order of clips, didn't we? And again, you can do that just as easily here on the cut page. In actual fact, it's probably even easier. You don't even need to think about it, because before we had to hold down, you know, whether it was a ripple cut, a paste insert, and all the rest of it. In this case, this last clip of soundbite here doesn't make any sense at the end. It makes more sense in the middle between the second and third clips. So we're going to pick it up, and I use the upper timeline for this. So I'm going to click on the clip in the upper timeline, and I'm going to drag the clip backwards so that it moves to the edit point there between the second and third clips. It's about halfway into your timeline. And you'll notice as soon as I move to there, it snaps to that edit point, and then it puts a little gap in place. That's what I want, because now when I let go, it moves the clip into that gap. So now the clip is shuffled around into the right order. And again, just to preview that edit at the beginning there.
The landscapes. That's what really inspires us. And we take that inspiration and we bring.
And we'll move to the next edit and just listen to the end of that.
The landscapes.
Sorry, excuse me. Deselect the clip and then preview.
design process starts. Our brand is just really a reflection of
Excellent. Okay, so now we've got the sound bites in. What we now need to do is we just need to edit around that in order to be able to fill the piece out. So first thing we're going to do is just so that we can easily visually identify each of these interview clips on the timeline. Let's select the clips in the bin, in the media pool, right click them and choose clip color orange. So select all the interview clips in the media pool, right click any of them, choose clip color orange, and that will just simply label each of those clips as orange. And because you've changed them in the bin, they also change in the timeline as well. It just means that we can easily sort of see where we are on the timeline. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to put in a sort of a holding slide for a graphic at the beginning and the end, some sort of background. There is actually, we know that there's a shot of organ mounting from a distance that's really nice, so we want to use that. So from the bin list, go to your scenery bin and press Q to jump into your source tape. Now you can scrub through the source tape and you're looking for this shot here, this shot of organ mounting. If you can't find it as quickly as that, just simply find the thumbnail of organ mounting and just click on it in order to jump to it. So you can scrub through using the source tape or just click on it using the thumbnail in the bin. And what we want to do is just go near the beginning of the clip. You could go to the first frame, it really doesn't matter, but go near the beginning of the clip. Set an in point. And one of the things that we did in the edit page was we actually used timecode to jump forward and set an out point for duration. Here's something you can do in the cut page that you can't do in the edit page. If you go up here to this timecode window just at the top right, this is your duration. If you select all those numbers and type in 700, so 700 in that duration box, hit return, and it will set a 7-second duration. If it happens to go beyond the end of the clip, just reset your in point a few seconds earlier or go to the beginning of the clip. He says, go to the beginning of the clip, set an in point, and then set your 7 seconds. Either way, once you've got your 7-second duration set, click on the clip in the viewer and drag it into your upper timeline to the very beginning of the timeline. And you'll notice how everything shuffles up out of the way. Do the same to the end. So you've now got an opening using the organ mounting time lapse, and you've also got a closing shot of the organ mounting time lapse. And you notice how you're able to drag the clips into the timeline. Sorry, Sherwin.
No, sorry. Hey, Chris, something happened maybe a few minutes ago where the viewer kind of changed. Is there a way you can change it, turn it off side by side mode? I know you didn't do anything, but something popped up.
Yeah. If you've used that scrubbing in or out or something like that, and you've got a side by side mode, probably the easiest thing to do is actually to switch to timeline and then back to source tape.
Sorry, I meant in the Zoom app, your viewer, not in Resolve. I mean in Zoom. Sorry.
So what do I need to do?
I think maybe in your view options, turn off side-by-side mode or turn it on and off.
Bear with me, guys. Bear with me. We will get there. We have the ability to be able to do this. Okay, Sherwin, I could find you the preference in Resolve for being able to show the playhead shadow, but I can't seem to find the preference in this. So side-by-side mode is off in my preferences.
Okay, all right. We'll think if you turn it on and then off, but it's okay. I mean, we'll just kind of have to go with it.
All right. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we will press on. We will press on. But you can see how easy it is to be able to just drag the clips into that main timeline, that main track one, and it will actually just insert the clips for you. However, we can also do something that we call a smart insert. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just move the playhead in the upper timeline back to the first clip. The first interview clip, so the first orange clip. And if I just play this towards the end of that clip.
We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the South.
So he introduces them and he says they're at the store. And I've now played into the second soundbite clip. Now, when I've done that, I've stopped the playhead. And looking at the lower timeline, you can see that there is a little white animated arrow pointing at that edit point nearest the playhead. And this is your smart indicator. So when you're making a smart insert, this is where Resolve is looking, not where the playhead is. So on the edit page, normally when you insert a shot, it actually inserts it at the playhead. But here in the cut page, it inserts it based on the smart indicator for the nearest edit point. So I'm going to leave the playhead where it is. I'm going to press Q to go into my source tape. And I'm looking for a shot of, it's actually this group of people, but it's not that shot. They're actually walking. So I'll scrub, this is the shot here. This shot of this group of people walking. It's amazing that this girl's jeans actually is holding together, I think, but that just probably goes to show my age. So it's this shot here. It's called Pine Tree Walking. So I'm just going to scrub through it and I'm just going to find the beginning of that shot. And just as I see the girl's face come from behind the trees, that's my in point. So just as I see her face come from behind the trees. And I'm just going to play that forward until the girl steps forward onto the next step. And that's my out point. So with my in and my out point set, I can now perform what we call a smart insert. This isn't quite the same as the insert because it uses the smart indicator, but we click on that and that then inserts the clip, but it doesn't split the existing clip. And the joy of this means that you don't have to be accurate with the playhead in the cut page. In actual fact, if we move the playhead to the end of the third orange clip, so the first, this is the second, this is the third, move the playhead near the end. This is where he says
The design process starts.
the design process starts. Again, you don't need to have the playhead at the end of the clip. You can just stop it whenever you feel comfortable. Just make sure that the smart indicator is pointing to the correct edit. Press Q to go back to your source tape. And let's go to the store bin. The store bin. Again, you can scrub through this and have a look at the footage that we've got. But ultimately what we're looking for is this first clip here. And I'm just going to play this clip, and you can see that this guy's designing a t-shirt here. And just probably about halfway into the clip, this sort of sun or moon graphic appears behind the mountain. So just a beat or so just before that, I'm going to add my in point. So just before that sun, mountain, moon, whatever the hell it is, appears on the t-shirt. That's where my in point is, just a moment before that. And I'm actually going to mark a 3-second duration, 3 second. So up in the duration box, highlight the numbers and type in 300, 300, hit return, and then hit the smart insert button. Cool. You'll remember on the edit page how we kind of overlapped interview clips and with other footage. And we can do the same sort of thing here in the cut page. It's probably even a little bit more straightforward. But in order to do that, we need additional video tracks. Now we can add tracks. There's no problem at all with that. But the cut page will automatically add tracks to the timeline anyway. So move the playhead to the second blue clip in the timeline. That is this shot of the girl walking with her holes in her jeans. And what we're going to do here is make sure your snapping is on. And we're going to select the clip, and the upper timeline is the easier place to do it. We're going to select the clip in the upper timeline and just click and drag upwards so that the clip moves upwards onto a new track. And if you've got your snapping on, it shouldn't move left or right. So just move it up and it will create a new track. And this time, go to the end of that clip and just trim it out about maybe a second and a half. So around about maybe around about a second or so, just before she disappears off the edge of the frame. So maybe for me, around about 1 second, 15 frames or something like that. So it's nearly a 4-second shot. Then if you select that clip and hit the / key.
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique.
There we go. And we've now got a nice split edit with a cutaway over the top of it. We're going to do the same for the third blue clip in this upper timeline. So I'm going to move the playhead over it, click on the clip, drag him up to the second video track. And this time, rather than lengthen the clip, I'm actually just going to trim the gap underneath it. So I'm going to select the out point of the gap and I'm just going to trim it back. I'm kind of going to have to eyeball this to try and trim it back around about a second, but I don't need to trim very far, but you can see how it's pulling the rest of the timeline underneath it, just so I get a little bit of overlap.
Our brand is just really a reflection of
So again, we're just creating those little split edits just to make the whole thing flow a little bit more. As well as that, of course, we can actually edit directly onto this new track. So we can actually put cutaways in over the top of that. So we're going to do that in a second, but just before we do that, we're just going to play around, look at how we might edit these things together. So first of all, return the playhead in the upper timeline to the very beginning of your timeline. So again, this is the graphic of this is the image of Organ Mountain here. And we've actually been given a graphic of the store's logo. So we want to use that over the top of this. So if you go to the bin called graphics, there is a PNG file in there. If you press Q to go into source tape, it will actually show you the PNG file. It's the only thing that's in that bin anyway, but it does mean that it's automatically selected. And then come down here to this button here at the bottom of your media pool. This is your place on top button. And that places the graphic over the top of the clip. Obviously, this graphic isn't quite long enough for the 7-second clip. So just trim the graphic out until it snaps to the end of the mounting shot. Press Q to go back into source tape and go to your store bin. Go to the store bin. And here we're going to scrub through the source tape. And this is all shots of various things happening in the store. But towards the end, there is, well, towards the middle, I should say, there is this exterior shot of the actual retail store. People coming in and out. Again, about halfway into that shot, you've got this guy going in, and he's in this white shirt and shorts. Set an in point just before he lets go of the door. And set an out point as the girl in pink comes out. And again, just before she lets go of the door. The girl in the pink top and the dark hat. And here we're just going to take that clip and drag it down and drop it so it snaps to the end of the blue clip, the third blue clip on the track 2. Third blue clip on track 2. Place the playhead over it and just preview that back.
our brand is just really a reflection of our community and who we are. The only way to do that is to experience it.
And I'm just going to trim that back a little bit.
The only way to do that is
The only way to do that, and I'm just going to trim back in the lower timeline area so that the clip snaps to the playhead.
who we are. The only way to do that is to experience it.
Now, the important thing about this is you'll notice that we're now starting to trim clips on the upper track in the timeline. The important thing to remember here is in the cut page, any trimming that you do on the first track actually will ripple the timeline, but any trimming that you do on any other track won't. So in this case, if I trim this interview clip, the timeline will ripple. But if I trim this top clip here, I try and it won't ripple. It will actually overwrite the clip. So, you know, or leave a gap if I shorten it. So I'm just going to undo those changes I've just made, but that's the basic overriding rule in the cut page. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put in a series of cutaways. So I've shown you how we can use the place on top. I've shown you how we can use the drag and drop. If you return the playhead to the end of the second blue clip on the video 2 track, so move it to the end of that clip. So I'm going to move the playhead near it and use the up or down arrows to make sure I'm snapping at the end there. The lower timeline tells me I'm in the right place. I'm going to switch to the source tape and I'm going to move to the scenery bin. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put in a series of shots, one after the other. So we're going to move really quickly through this. So the first clip I'm looking for is a similar clip to what we used before. It's actually this close-up shot here of the trail with the steps and the 3 people that we saw before, including the girl with the holy jeans. They come into shot and then we get this wide shot of the mountain in the distance. So this is Pine Tree Trail. I forget what the other one is, the other portion of that, but don't worry about the file name. Just find the clip in the source tape. The in point for that is just before the 3rd guy comes into shot. And the out point is a few seconds later. So allow the guy to walk into shot and then take about 5 steps so that you see the mountains in the distance. And that's your out point. So play it through, allow him to take 4, 5 or 6 steps, set your out point. And because the playhead's in the right place, you should be able to just do a place on top edit. Move your playhead through the source tape towards the end, past all of this yoga stuff till you find this shot here of the 4 friends and the dog and the white sands. So you could use the up and down arrow keys to move to it until you find it as well. Again, it's the 4th shot from the end. White Sands Dunes is the name of the clip. You're concentrating on this girl here in the pink. Set an in point just before she raises her hand up. So an in point just before she raises her hand. And what she does is she just hooks her hair over her ear. So your out point is as she brings her hand back down. It's quite a short shot. So in point as she raises her hand, out point as she brings her hand back down, and that's your place on top edit. The next shot we're after is of the girl doing the fire dance, which is around here. So it's towards the beginning of the timeline. It's actually after the Organ Mountain shot. A quick way of being able to identify this shot is just use the thumbnail. And again, click once on the media pool clip and it will jump straight to that clip. You want to take a 3-second shot of anywhere within the clip. So you could go to the beginning, mark you're in, and then set your 3 seconds. But if I just add an in point, highlight the numbers, 300, return, place on top. And there's one more clip to find. Scrub back all the way to the beginning of your source tape, and you've got this shot of this guy jumping on the rock. Set an in point just as he's jumping up onto the rock. And set an out point 4 seconds later. So highlight the numbers, 400, place on top. So that is your series of cutaways. I'm just going to play that back for you. You should have something like this.
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. There's nothing like it that I have personally ever experienced, whether it's the community, the culture, the food, the landscapes. That's what really inspires us. And we take that inspiration and
It won't necessarily be exactly the same. But, you know, you just throw those shots in, but then you still need to go back and you probably need to trim it up. So let's move the playhead over this edit point between the second and third blue clip on track 2. And if I just preview this edit here, watch the pictures.
we want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique.
It kind of works, but it could probably be finessed a little bit more. So in this case, what I'm going to do is come down to the lower timeline, move my mouse pointer between the edit point, between those first 2 blue clips of this sequence where people are walking. And I'm going to click and hold, and I'm now doing a rolling edit. And you can see that as I move the mouse back and forth, what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the viewer on the right. This is where the close-up of the guy with his foot stepping forward onto the step. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find the point just before he places his foot on the step. Out there. So I'm rolling it back a few frames. Now, the problem with that is that the outgoing shot didn't match. So here in the timeline, I've actually got a slip symbol. I don't even need to select any tools or anything. I can just slip any clip. So I'm going to click on this, hold, and now I can slip that footage until he takes a step forward with his left foot. Now, it's not quite going to match because he doesn't do the same movement onto the step with his left foot, but you'll be able to cheat it. So again, top right frame is what I'm looking at here, and I want to find the point where he's stepping forward with his left foot. And the bottom right frame is actually the in point of the following shot. So now when I play that back,
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique.
it sort of cheats it. Okay. This shot following, this is the shot of the friends on the dune, is actually quite short. Now, if I just scrub through this, now I could trim the end of this out, but the problem with that is, remember, this won't ripple on this upper track. So I could trim it out, but that will make this shot shorter. So then I'd end up having to extend or lengthen this shot. That's going to have a knock-on effect on this shot. And the whole thing gets to be quite messy. I mean, I can do it, but it's just a little bit involved. So let me just undo that. So instead, what I can do is I can actually slide this shot of the fire dancer. Now, this is different from actually moving it. If I move it, I leave a gap, which I need to lengthen that clip into. So not a huge problem. But if you hold down if you select the fire dancer clip, hold down the shift key, and that's not helpful because you can't really see what's happening. So I'm going to turn off my keyboard shortcuts actually for this. So I'll turn off the keyboard shortcut. If I move and hold the shift key down over that clip, you can actually see that my symbol turns from a slip to a slide. And I can now click on that and move the clip, and it actually uses the handles of the other clips below it in order to be able to move the clip along, and it actually fills in the gap as well, so I don't have to replace that by lengthening the previous clip. So if I move that forward and slide that forward by 1 second whilst holding the shift key down,
Culture,
this then does have a knock-on effect on the following clip.
food, the landscape, unity, the culture, the food, the landscapes.
In that he's partway through his jump. So now what I need to do is I now need to slip him just to get rid of the jump or just to include it. So again, click on the clip for this, slip, and I'm just going to slip him back just so that he's actually already on the rock and just before he turns his head as well. And it's a much nicer shot.
Culture, the food, the landscapes. That's what really inspires us.
And I'm also going to trim him out by probably about half a second, just so that he's actually covering Chris's line about it really inspires us.
The culture, the food, the landscapes. That's what really inspires us. And we take that inspiration and
Just give you a few minutes just to finesse those few little shots. There are a number of ways that you can do it, but this just goes to show you know, you've got all of the editing functions that you're probably familiar with from the other page, the edit page. Cool. Okay, those of you who were quite observant probably noticed that we had an awful lot of interview clips. And actually some of those clips were of Chris in close-up, and some of them were actually in Chris in wide shot. And the cut page has a unique edit function just for the cut page itself that allows you to edit these multiple cameras together. This isn't the same way that the edit page edits multiple cameras. That is slightly different. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to use those second camera angles. So for this, we don't want to edit the audio in twice. So we're going to turn the audio off so that we just do a video edit. And in this case, all we need to do here is just click this button on the far left of the timeline, this video only button. So click the video only button. It's just above the snapping there. Press Q to go to your source tape and switch to your interviews bin. And what we have is we have 4 clips of him in close-up, and we also have 4 clips of him in wide shot. So if you go to the first of those wide shot clips, this is the same part of the interview as the first interview clip that we worked with. So this is where he introduces himself.
And where we are, sorry.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Oregon Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
So when he says we are located in our store, it would make sense if we actually saw him in his store. So I'm just going to back the playhead up.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Oregon Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Out just before he finishes the sentence. So in just before he says we are located in our store. And an out point just before he says New Mexico. Now you'll notice I didn't get you to place the timeline playhead anywhere. That's because we don't need to, because we're about to do something called a source overwrite edit. So if we click this source overwrite button here, bang, it puts the clip exactly where it needs to be in the timeline.
Mountain Outfitters, we are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Mind blown. It's not magic though. It is all to do with time code and accurate time code. So all of these clips here actually have matching time code. So the cut page knows that if you've got a matching time code like that, odds are it probably needs to work together. So when you do a source overwrite, it will actually match the 2 time codes together and place the clip exactly where it needs to be. You do need to have matching time code though. If you don't have matching time code, then it won't work. You can manually synchronize material together as well. So you can do the following steps, which is actually using something called the sync bin. The lesson goes through how to do that. If you've got matching audio, for example, you can synchronize the angles using audio. But this just goes to show how easy it is if you've got matching time code. However, if you don't have matching time code, you can still use the next steps, which are the sync bin. So if you click here at the top for the sync bin, now this depends where you are on the timeline, but here, for example, if I move my mouse, if I move my playhead over a clip, one of the blue clips, you'll see it says no synced clips, because there's nothing else within this project that has a matching time code for that clip. But if I move over any of the interviews, you can see it gives me the 2 clips that are synchronized together. So if we move to the end of these cutaways here, where the next interview is, and if you select the camera here, this is the camera that you're currently using, the one with the red badge in the corner. But if you select the other camera, that then goes into source clip mode, and we can actually reset the in and the out points here. I don't want to change the in point because it matches the position of the playhead in the timeline. But if I play this,
and we take that inspiration and we bring it back to the store.
We bring it back to the store, out, source overwrite. Move to the last interview clip, click on the unused camera angle.
Is to experience it. And that's why we say,
and that's why we say out, source override. That's why we say source override. See, there are a few questions coming in there, so I'll just give everyone a moment just to get their head around that. So you make sure you're in the sync bin. And then when you move your playhead over any of the interview clips, it will show you the matching angles. Simply place the playhead where you want that clip to start, click on the unused angle, reset the out point if necessary, and then make a source overwrite edit. It has to be the source overwrite for that to work. In actual fact, if I just now go back to the timeline mode in the viewer, you can then go in and you can then refine the edits. You don't want to move those clips at all, but you can always trim them. So
the only way to do that is to experience it. And that's why we say experience the Southwest.
Great. I like that. Cut to him at the end. This shot here, I'm actually just going to trim that to the next edit point and then trim this about halfway through.
That's what really inspires us. And we take that inspiration and we bring it back to the store. And that's really where the design process starts.
And this one here.
We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
That will do for me. So this is the type of work that you would find quite monotonous in the edit page as well. We're just going to add just a few more things just to wrap this little project up. We're going to add a piece of music. We're going to set the audio levels. We're going to add an effect to the graphic and a transition. And finally, we're going to add a title. So hopefully you guys can keep up with us. Playhead back to the beginning. Now, if you go to the music bin, there is actually a music clip in there. Bizarrely, audio clips don't show up in the source tape. Don't know why, they just don't. So even if you went to the source tape here, it wouldn't actually select anything. But if you actually go to the source clip and click on that music clip, you will open the clip. It is the right length, so you don't need to change the in and the out points. So if you select that, you need to come down here and turn off your video only edit, because we need to, otherwise you won't be able to bring the audio only clip in, because it's expecting you to just bring video in. But then if you hit the place on top edit, that will actually bizarrely add your audio underneath. But because it's audio, it goes in exactly the right place. You could drag it into position as well, but just make sure that you turn off your video only edit, because I've sat here for quite a long time trying to drag it in and trying to edit it in and can't work out why it's not telling me why it won't bring your audio only in. It's all because of that button there. Now to set the audio level, because it's going to be quite loud to begin with, to set the audio level, what you can do is you could use the inspector for this. There's no volume curve like there is in the edit page, or we actually have a set of tools that can open easily below the viewer. So I'm just going to bring the playhead back near the beginning. I'm going to select the audio clip and click on the tools button here. This is to the right of your fast review button. And by default, because it's an audio clip, it'll actually show you the audio level. Now there's no numbers for this. It's just a case of being able to play it and listen and look at the meters.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Oregon Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Oregon Mountain Outfitters.
Might seem a bit strange that you can't just lower it by a set amount. You can open the inspector and you can use the volume slider adjustment in the inspector. But the other thing about this that's good is that it gets you to listen to it, and it gets you to look at the meters, and it gets you to set your volume in an intuitive way rather than just relying on the numbers. Also, the tools button that's been currently highlighted on the screen at the moment actually brings up a set of controls. There's much more here than just the audio controls, but it actually brings up a set of controls which, although you've got full access to the inspector, which we'll look at in a little bit, the tools underneath the viewer there are just easily accessible, particularly on a laptop. They're not going to take up huge amounts of room as well. So hopefully you can access those tools very, very quickly. I'm going to bring the playhead all the way back to the beginning of my project here, my timeline. And what we want to do is we want to fade in the Organ Mountain Outfitters logo. So first of all, trim using the bottom timeline, trim the beginning of the Organ Mounting Outfitters logo by about 2 seconds. So 2 seconds to trim it to have it come in. And then position the playhead near that edit point. You don't need to be exactly on it. Just make sure the smart indicator is pointing at that edit point. And then you have some quick transitions that you can apply. This is a cut, which will actually remove any existing transition that's there, but this is your cross dissolve. So click to apply the cross dissolve and it will apply it at the smart indicator location. And again, you can trim that transition to be whichever duration that you want. I'm going to go with half a second there, so 12 frames. Just back to playhead up. So that fades the clip in. You've actually got a whole transitions browser here. So if you click the transitions browser at the top, these are all of your standard transitions that you can apply and use just as you would anywhere else. You've also got access to some titles and effects. So let's click on the effects here. And with the Organ Mounting Outfitters logo clip selected, if you scroll through the effects and you find the Resolve Stylize section, you can then take the drop shadow effect and you can either drag it onto the clip in the timeline or double click it to apply it, just to help the logo stand out a little bit. I hadn't noticed that button before. It looks as though that allows you to apply the effect to the selected clip. And finally, we're going to add a fusion title. So move the playhead to the last clip in your timeline. Now, if you play it forward, you listen to the music, you'll actually hear a sort of a beat. It's around about 50 seconds into the timeline. There, strum. There. That's where I want the title to come in. So I'm going to go to my titles at the top. And these are, again, all of the usual titles that you'll find in the edit page. You've got access to your text plus title, but there is one title that I'm looking for in particular. It's in the Fusion title section. It's called Draw on Corners, one line. Draw on Corners, one line. You can actually live preview this by selecting it and moving the playhead, moving the mouse backwards and forwards over it. Draw on corners, one line. Select it and then click on your place on top. That then places the clip exactly where I want it. Whilst I'm here and I can just see it, I can see that the clips here aren't long enough to reach the end of the music. So I'm going to trim out both of those clips, the title and the organ mounting shot underneath, just so that it's the same length. Now, in order to be able to edit this Fusion title, the best place to do that is in the inspector. actually. So if you select the clip for the title in the timeline, click on the inspector, and this will open up the full inspector. So any of the inspector stuff that we've done before in any of the other pages, as soon as you open the inspector, you can change things. The downside of this is that if you're working on a laptop, it will push the rest of the windows out of the way. So sometimes it's a mixed blessing, to be honest. But in this case, in the sample text area, highlight that and type in organ mounting outfitters.com. I'll let you choose the fonts and the font colors. I think we've probably been through that, but a little further down, you'll see it says box color and shape. If you twirl that open, you can choose the actual color of these borders here. I actually quite like to put it in as yellow, so I'll reduce the blue there for a nice yellow border. And the other thing is, that's quite nice about this, you can have a play around with this, but if you adjust the wheel here for line position, you can actually change where those lines actually finish. So you could have them appear almost like as little brackets around the edge of that. When you have finished, close down the inspector, preview the title. It may take a moment to cache it, so if it doesn't play in real time, first of all, go back and play it again. Finally, go back to the beginning of the timeline, and when you're ready, press full screen up here in the top right. That will take you into a full screen mode to watch your video back.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Organ Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
I'm not going to play that for you. Pressing escape will return me out of this. And you've also got access to your quick export window here as well. So click on the quick export and you'll be able to export out an H.264 file. And that is how the cut page works. Hopefully you found it useful. It's always a good fun one to work with. Part of the challenge of it is to actually show you how smooth and how quickly you can do things in the cut page, which you can still do things in the edit page with. It's not a problem at all. But that's what the cut page is designed for. It's designed to work quickly. I often describe it as not pretty editing, but it's effective editing. Nevertheless, if you find something that's a bit of a struggle with the cut page and you need to use features in the edit page, you can just go directly to the edit page and you've got all of the usual editing functions that are there. Or you might be working in the edit page and want to use some of the features in the cut page, like the source tape, for example, in which case you can just hop across to the cut page and carry on working there. So it's meant to be used not in isolation. It's meant to be used as a sort of a separate environment, if you like, for editing than the traditional edit page. Cool. How did we get on, guys?
Great.
Great, great.
Awesome. Awesome. I see there's a few questions coming in, so I'll just give you a moment, just in case there's any sticking points there. But hopefully people can see how cool the cut page works and what it does. It's still an ongoing sort of in development piece of work. It's not by no means finished. So I can only imagine what we can expect from in as the software develops. So watch this space, in other words.
Yeah, most of the
Please.
comments and questions have been about how people enjoyed the cut page.
Cool.
There was a question. Do you think there's any time to address a speed editor and cut page?
Yeah. I mean, if you do have access to a speed editor, then it is definitely worth spending a bit of time practicing with it. It is designed purely for the cut page. So although it has some functionality in edit, color, and even Fairlight, I think, it is purely designed for the cut page. In the book, in the beginner's guide book, there is a few sort of like little indicators as to how to use the speed editor. I mean, mainly it's the buttons for source and timeline. It give you access to the source tape and the timeline, so you can easily switch back and forth between the source tape and the timeline. It's not meant as a replacement for your mouse and keyboard. It's meant as working side by side with your mouse and keyboard. So don't think it's just, complete replacement for that. I mean, for example, you need a mouse and a keyboard in order to be able to access the inspector and type in titles, for example. But yes, it is a piece of hardware that is designed to be solely used with the cut page.
Chris,
How it will become in the future, who knows? Sorry, Diego.
yeah, I want to say that we edit a video clip using cut page and the edit page, and we mix it all the time. I will post it in the chat. It's a dancing song, so it's Friday, so you can dance also. But we did all in Resolve, and we mix the cut and the edit page all of the time.
Yeah. It's a case of picking and choosing. Do you need to do everything in the cut page? No, you don't. But certain things such as the source overwrite, the source tape, these are techniques that I'm using now in the cut page as well, and they don't have equivalents in the edit page, not really, not in the same way. And the organization in the media pool is new as well. So yeah. Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed this week. It's always a little bit of a challenge, but we try and cover as much as possible, and hopefully this has given you an insight into some parts of Resolve. Maybe it's also giving you the opportunity to spend more time with Resolve than you might have done. So thank you very much for joining us. It's really only left for me to just do one more thing, and that is to give you a little bit of information regarding the exam. Remember, we have a license giveaway for Resolve Studio available. If you've attended at least 4 of these sessions and you pass the beginner's end user exam within 48 hours of this session finishing, you'll be automatically entered into a draw for that license. The names will be drawn at random. You do need to pass the beginner's end user exam. It's not just take it, you do need to pass it. And if you're successful, you will be notified by email using the email that you use to register for the exam. So that's the studio license giveaway. We can give you the link to the exam, and when you access the exam, you will be asked to put some information in, including your name and also the email address that you want the certificate to be sent to. and also the notification if you are successful at winning the studio license. The first name and last name is what appears on your certificate, and the email address is also where the certificate is sent to once you pass. So it's probably worth making sure that you spell your name correctly. Or if you always want to be known as Fluffy Bunny 84, then by all means include that in your assessment registration. In terms of the Blackmagic Design training partner country, please put in your country, whether you're in the US, if you're in Europe, or if you're in Asia or wherever. Just put in the country that you are currently in, or your nationality or wherever. But where it says Blackmagic Design training partner name, just choose other. And then in the other box, just say Blackmagic Design Zoom training, or Zoom training on its own will do, because this isn't an official training partner way of delivering training at the moment. So this is directly from Blackmagic Design. So if you could do that, that would be great. That would be great. Other than that, the exam actually consists of 60-minute duration. During that 60 minutes, you'll get asked 50 questions with a cut mark of 85%. So you must get above 85% in order to pass the exam. You can have up to 3 attempts to pass the exam. However, if you need to retake the exam for any reason, you must wait at least 24 hours between those 2 attempts. So if you're trying to go for the studio license and you think you might need more than 1 attempt, remember to give yourself that time to have, you can only have up to 2 attempts to pass within the 48 hours, of course. Also, the exam is available in multiple languages. I'm going to give you the link to the English version of the exam, but if you need a different language, for example, I believe that the exams are available in Spanish, Portuguese, Chinese, I think is available to us as well. I think Sherwin has a list of links for that. Although alternatively, if you go to the Blackmagic Design training pages for DaVinci Resolve and choose your country from the little flag symbol up in the top right corner, you should be able to gain access to the exam in the language of that country. So if you're finding it difficult to try and get onto an exam in your language, then please let us know. Otherwise, it's only left for me to say thank you very much. I have enjoyed running these sessions. I hope you have too. It is now Friday, and therefore there's one last thing for us to say, which is good luck with your exam. This is the link to the English version of the exam. I think Sherwin's probably posting, if he's not already done so, posting different links for different languages. But thank you very much. Hopefully at some point we might be able to get to run these sessions in person, and it would be very good to meet people. But otherwise, thank you very much. Enjoy your weekend and good luck with your exam. Thank you.